In the rush of the city, a poor girl's simple scream on a bus altered destinies. Her brave act saved lives, including that of a powerful man. Days later, she showed up asking for help for her mother, and there was the millionaire. The morning fog clung to Portland streets like a stubborn memory. In the Pearl District, where glass buildings reached for the sky and coffee shops charged $7 for lattes, 12-year-old Lily Reynolds was invisible. Not in the supernatural sense, but in the way society has of looking right through those it would rather not see. Lily had mastered the art of existing in the margins. With no birth certificate, no school records, and no fixed address, she was a ghost in a city that prided itself on progressiveness. Her education came from public libraries, overheard conversations, and the harsh curriculum of survival. For the past 2 years, since her mother Elena had disappeared, Lily had lived wherever she could find shelter, under bridges, in abandoned buildings, or in the makeshift tent communities that dotted the city's periphery. Her small backpack contained everything she owned: a worn blanket, a toothbrush with frayed bristles, a water bottle, and scraps of fabric she collected from dumpsters behind clothing stores. From these discarded pieces, Lily's nimble fingers created dolls with surprising detail: button eyes salvaged from discarded shirts, yarn hair unraveled from forgotten scarves, clothes patched together from fabric samples. These creations she sold at traffic lights to make enough money for food. "Look how pretty she is," Lily would say to drivers stopped at red lights, holding up her latest creation. Some days she'd make $15, some days nothing at all. On the best days, someone would buy her a meal instead of just giving her money. Today was not one of the good days. The October chill had settled early over the city, and most people kept their windows rolled up, eyes forward, pretending not to see the thin girl with the handmade dolls. By mid-afternoon, Lily had sold nothing, and her stomach growled with a familiar emptiness. She wandered toward the South Waterfront District, where construction of new luxury condominiums created a cacophony of progress. Sometimes the workers would share their lunches if they saw her watching. One man, Miguel, often saved her half of his sandwich, saying she reminded him of his daughter back in Texas. "You're just in time," Miguel said, spotting her near the fence. He wore an orange safety vest over layers of flannel and denim. "Ham and cheese today. And look, my wife packed an extra cookie." Lily accepted the food with a small smile, but said nothing. She'd learned that talking too much made adults uncomfortable. They'd start asking questions she couldn't answer about parents and school and where she lived. "You should be in school, you know," Miguel said gently, not for the first time. "There are people who could help you." But Lily knew better. The one time she'd been caught by social services after her mother disappeared, she'd been placed in a foster home where the parents collected checks for 6 kids they barely fed. She'd run away after 3 weeks and promised herself never to trust the system again. "I'm learning things," she said quietly, which wasn't a lie. Yesterday she'd spent 4 hours in the Central Library, reading a book about stars and planets. The day before she'd learned about the Civil War. The security guards let her stay as long as she was quiet and didn't bother anyone. After finishing her sandwich, Lily thanked Miguel and continued her walk. She headed toward the river, where tourists sometimes bought her dolls, charmed by what they saw as local artisanal crafts rather than a child's means of survival. The waterfront was busy with joggers and dog walkers enjoying the brief appearance of afternoon sun. Lily set up her dolls on a bench, arranging them carefully to show off their unique features. A businessman hurried past, his expensive shoes clicking on the pavement, phone pressed to his ear. He didn't notice Lily, but she noticed him, his tailored suit, his gold watch, the way he moved like the world was his to command. "Significant market fluctuations. Yes, I understand the concerns," he was saying. "The board meeting is tomorrow and I'll have the complete analysis by then." He walked on, and Lily sold a doll to a tourist from Minnesota who said it would be a perfect gift for her granddaughter. $8, enough for dinner at the food cart pod. As evening approached, Lily packed up her remaining dolls. She had a hiding place beneath the Morrison Bridge, where she'd left her blanket and a few books. It wasn't safe to sleep there every night. You had to keep moving, but her instincts told her it would be okay tonight. She was walking along 2nd Avenue when she heard it. The screech of tires, a dull thud, then silence. Too much silence. The sound came from around the corner on Stark Street, a usually busy intersection now strangely quiet. Curiosity pulled her forward. As she turned the corner, she saw a sleek black Tesla had mounted the curb and crashed into a light pole. The airbags had deployed, but the driver wasn't moving. A small crowd had gathered, but in that peculiar urban phenomenon, nobody was doing anything. They stood with phones raised, recording rather than helping. "Someone call 911, a woman said, but she made no move to do it herself. "I think someone already did," a man replied, though it was clear nobody had. Lily pushed through the onlookers to get a better look. The driver was slumped over the steering wheel. Middle-aged, grey at the temples, wearing an expensive suit. It was the businessman from the waterfront. The doors were locked, windows up, and a thin wisp of smoke was coming from under the hood. Without hesitation, Lily picked up a broken piece of concrete from a nearby construction site. The crowd gasped as she approached the car. "Hey kid, what are you—" someone started to say, but Lily had already swung the concrete chunk against the passenger window. It didn't break. She tried again, hitting the corner of the glass this time. With a crack, the window shattered. Reaching through the broken window, she unlocked the door and climbed inside. The man was still breathing, but his eyes remained closed. The smell of burning electrical components grew stronger. With strength born of adrenaline, Lily unbuckled his seatbelt and tried to pull him from the vehicle. "Help me!" she called out, and finally, two men rushed forward. Together, they managed to extract the unconscious businessman and lay him gently on the sidewalk away from the smoking car. Only then did the wail of sirens fill the air. The emergency responders arrived, pushing the crowd back and taking over care of the injured man. One paramedic asked Lily if she was related to him. "No," she said simply, and while the professionals were busy with the businessman, she slipped away. But something stopped her from going far. She watched from the shadow of a doorway as they loaded the man into an ambulance. She heard one EMT say, "That's Robert Caldwell," with a tone of recognition. The name meant nothing to Lily, but the reverence in the paramedic's voice suggested he was someone important. When the ambulance pulled away, Lily followed its path with her eyes until it disappeared. Then, acting on an impulse she didn't fully understand, she began walking in the direction of Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, where she knew ambulances from downtown usually went. It would be a long walk uphill, but Lily was used to walking, and somehow she felt a strange connection to this man whose life she had just saved. As if invisible threads of fate had suddenly entangled them together. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that those threads had been woven long before today's accident, that they stretched back years to before she was even born, that the man she'd pulled from the wreckage held answers to questions she hadn't even thought to ask about her own existence. As night fell over Portland, Lily climbed the long hill toward the hospital, one careful step at a time. Behind her, the lights of the city sparkled like fallen stars. Ahead, somewhere in those hospital corridors, destiny waited. The fluorescent lights of Oregon Health and Science University Hospital hummed overhead as Lily slipped through the automatic doors of the emergency entrance. After the mile-long uphill trek, her legs ached, but determination pushed her forward. The bustling emergency room was a chaos of activity, nurses rushing between curtained areas, doctors being paged over the intercom, worried families huddled in plastic chairs. Lily had become adept at making herself invisible when necessary. She hunched her shoulders, kept her head down and moved with purpose as if she belonged. No one stopped the small girl in the faded jeans and oversized hoodie as she navigated the corridors, following signs toward the intensive care unit. At the ICU waiting room she paused. Through the glass doors she could see people in expensive clothes huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. A tall man with dark hair paced back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear. A woman with perfectly highlighted blonde hair dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Something about them, their bearing, their clothes, the way others deferred to them, told Lily they were connected to the man she'd saved. "The doctors say he's stable, but they're concerned about the head trauma," the tall man was saying into his phone. "No, Aunt Margaret, you don't need to fly in yet. Sarah and Michael are here with me. We'll call if anything changes." Lily found a chair in the corner of the outer waiting area, partially hidden behind a large potted plant. From this vantage point, she could observe without being noticed. Hospital staff walked past without giving her a second glance. In their world of urgent priorities, a quiet child waiting patiently registered as no threat. Hours passed. The woman, Sarah, Lily presumed, left briefly and returned with coffee cups. The youngest of the three, a man with curly brown hair and glasses who must be Michael, dozed fitfully in his chair. The tall one, who seemed to be in charge, continued his vigil, occasionally speaking with doctors in low, urgent tones. When visiting hours ended at 9 o'clock, the three reluctantly prepared to leave. "James, maybe one of us should stay," Sarah suggested, touching her older brother's arm. "The nurses said they'll call immediately if there's any change," James replied. "We all need rest. Tomorrow could be a long day." As they walked past, Lily slipped deeper into her chair, becoming smaller, less noticeable. Once they were gone, she waited another 20 minutes before making her move. The ICU was restricted, but Lily had learned that most security systems were designed to keep people out, not in. She found a service door being used by cleaning staff and slipped inside when a custodian wheeled a large cart through. The sterile smell of disinfectant burned her nostrils as she padded silently down the corridor. Room numbers guided her. She overheard a nurse mention, "Mr. Caldwell in 412, and that was all she needed. Finding the room was easy, getting inside would be harder. A nurse sat at a central station, monitoring screens displaying patient vital signs. Lily waited for the inevitable moment when the nurse would step away, bladder and bureaucracy being the two constants in any workplace. When the moment came, Lily moved quickly to room 412. Through the window in the door, she could see him, the man from the car now connected to machines that beeped and hummed. His face was pale but peaceful. A bandage wrapped around his head, and tubes ran from his arms to hanging bags of fluid. Carefully, she turned the handle and slipped inside, easing the door closed behind her. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors and a small light above the bed. Lily approached cautiously, studying the man who had unwittingly drawn her here. Robert Caldwell was probably in his late 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair. His face, even in unconsciousness, held a certain strength. Prominent cheekbones, a straight nose, a firm jaw now relaxed in sedated sleep. One hand lay atop the blanket, an IV needle taped to the back. His fingers were long and elegant, with a gold signet ring on his right hand. Lily wasn't sure why she felt compelled to be here. She'd saved people before, guided a lost toddler back to his mother in a park, helped an elderly woman who'd fallen on an icy sidewalk. But she'd never felt this strange pull, this certainty that she needed to stay. She settled into the chair beside his bed, her small frame barely making an impression on the padded seat. The steady beep of the heart monitor created a hypnotic rhythm that matched the rise and fall of his chest. Without fully understanding why, Lily began to talk to him. "I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered, "but I'm the one who broke your car window. Sorry about that. It seemed like the right thing to do." She paused, listening to the machines. "I hope you get better. You seem important. Those people who were here earlier, they seemed really worried about you." The monitors continued their electronic vigil. Robert Caldwell didn't stir, but somehow Lily felt he could hear her. She pulled her legs up onto the chair, wrapping her arms around her knees. "I'll stay for a little while," she said, "just to make sure you're okay." A little while turned into hours. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications, but none noticed the small shadow in the corner chair. Lily had perfected the art of stillness, of blending into backgrounds. When one nurse spent longer than usual adjusting something on the IV stand, Lily slipped under the bed, holding her breath until the woman left. In the quiet hours of the night, Lily dozed, her head resting against the arm of the chair. She dreamed of a house with warm lights and soft beds, of a family gathered around a dinner table with more food than she'd ever seen. In her dream, there was a place set for her too. She woke with a start when the door opened again. Dawn was breaking outside the window, pale light filtering through the blinds. A doctor entered, followed by a nurse. Lily slid from the chair and into the bathroom, leaving the door open just a crack so she could hear. "Blood pressure is stabilizing. Brain activity looks good. I think we can reduce the sedation today, see if he'll wake up on his own," the doctor was saying. "Family's been notified to come in around 10, the nurse replied. "The son, James, he's been calling hourly for updates." After they left, Lily emerged from her hiding place. She knew she should go. Daylight made her more visible, more likely to be questioned. But something kept her rooted to the spot, a feeling she couldn't name. "I have to go now," she told the sleeping man. "But maybe I'll come back later." As she turned to leave, her eye caught something on the small table beside the bed, a wallet, keys, and a phone that had been removed from his pockets. Beside them lay a small object that made Lily freeze in place, a silver pendant on a broken chain, tarnished with age but unmistakable in its design, a tree with spreading branches enclosed in a circle. With trembling fingers, Lily reached beneath her own shirt and pulled out the pendant she always wore, the only thing her mother had insisted she never lose, the only thing she had left from her unknown father, an identical silver tree in a circle hanging from a leather cord. Her heart hammering in her chest, Lily stared from her pendant to the one on the table and back again. This couldn't be coincidence. This had to mean something. The sound of approaching voices in the hallway broke her trance. Quickly, she tucked her pendant back under her shirt and moved toward the door. But before leaving, she cast one more glance at Robert Caldwell, seeing him with new eyes. Who was this man to her? What secrets did he hold? Lily slipped out just as a nurse was entering the adjacent room. She navigated the morning shift change when the hospital was busy enough for a small girl to go unnoticed, and made her way back to the street. The October sun did little to warm the chill air, but Lily barely felt it. Her mind was racing, connecting invisible dots, reaching for a truth that seemed just beyond her grasp. She needed to come back. She needed answers. The pendant was a clue to her own story, a story she'd never known. And somehow, Robert Caldwell was a chapter in that book. As Lily walked down the hill toward the city, her hand kept returning to the pendant beneath her shirt, as if to reassure herself it was still there, that what she'd seen was real. For the first time in her life of careful invisibility, Lily wanted to be seen by the man lying unconscious in that hospital bed. What she didn't know was that someone had already seen her. As she'd slipped out of room 412, a security camera had captured her image, and soon, the Caldwell family would be asking questions about the mysterious girl who kept vigil through the night with the patriarch of their dynasty. James Caldwell stood at the window of his father's hospital room, watching rain streak down the glass. 3 days had passed since the accident, and Robert remained unconscious, though doctors had reduced his sedation and were cautiously optimistic. The family had established a rotation: James in the mornings, Sarah in the afternoons, Michael in the evenings, ensuring Robert was never alone. Except James was beginning to suspect his father wasn't alone, even when they weren't there. "Mr. Caldwell?" A hospital security officer knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Do you have a moment?" James nodded, following the man into the hallway. "We've reviewed the security footage from the past few nights," the officer said, holding a tablet. "There's something you should see." The video was grainy but clear enough. A small figure, unmistakably a young girl, slipping into his father's room after visiting hours. The timestamp showed 11:42 p.m. "She stays for hours," the officer explained, fast-forwarding. "Leaves before dawn. We've seen her 3 nights in a row now." James frowned. "Do you know who she is?" "No identification yet. She's not on any visitor logs. Somehow manages to avoid direct contact with staff. We thought she might be related to your family." "No," James said firmly, then hesitated. "At least I don't think so." The security officer showed him a still image captured from the footage. A thin girl with long dark hair, perhaps 12 or 13 years old, sitting in the chair beside his father's bed. Something about her face nagged at James's memory, though he was certain he'd never met her. "There's more," the officer continued. "We believe this is the same girl who was first on the scene at your father's accident. Witnesses described a young girl breaking the car window and helping pull your father out before paramedics arrived." James's eyes widened. "She saved him?" "Apparently. Then disappeared before police could take a statement. But why she's returning to his room every night? That's what concerns us." "She doesn't appear to be doing anything harmful," James observed, watching the footage of the girl simply sitting quietly beside his father. "No, but unauthorized access to patient rooms is a serious security breach. We'll have additional personnel monitoring this floor tonight." After the officer left, James returned to his father's bedside, studying the still unconscious man. Robert Caldwell had built Caldwell Technologies from a small software startup into a billion-dollar enterprise that dominated the Pacific Northwest tech landscape. His business acumen was legendary, his philanthropic work substantial but understated. What connection could he possibly have to a homeless child? James called his siblings, and by noon, all 3 Caldwell children were gathered in a conference room the hospital had provided for their use. "It doesn't make sense," Sarah said, examining the security image. "Why would she keep coming back?" Michael adjusted his glasses, a habit when he was thinking deeply. "Maybe she wants a reward. She did save Dad's life. Then why not approach us directly?" James countered. "Why the secret visits?" Sarah tapped her manicured nails on the table. "We need to find out who she is." "I'm working on it," James said. "I've got the police pulling footage from traffic cameras near the accident site, and I've hired Carson." Carson Reed was the private investigator the family used for sensitive matters. Background checks on potential business partners, vetting of household staff, occasional surveillance when corporate espionage was suspected. Discreet, thorough, and expensive. "Isn't that overkill?" Michael asked. "She's just a kid." "A kid who's repeatedly breaking into Dad's hospital room," James reminded him. "I want to know why." While the Caldwells strategized, Lily was across town at the Central Library, using a public computer to search for information about Robert Caldwell. The results were overwhelming. News articles about business acquisitions, philanthropic donations, technology innovations, photos of him at charity galas, business conferences, ribbon-cutting ceremonies. One image in particular caught her attention: Robert Caldwell at a company picnic 5 years ago, standing beside a younger man who looked strikingly similar. The caption identified him as Thomas Caldwell, Robert's younger brother, and the company's former chief operating officer. Thomas Caldwell. The name meant nothing to Lily, yet she felt drawn to his image. She studied his face, the same strong jaw as Robert, but softer somehow. Kinder eyes, a more relaxed smile. Something about him seemed familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Further searches revealed that Thomas Caldwell had left the company 3 years ago. There was little information about his departure, a brief press release thanking him for his service, mentioning he was pursuing personal interests. After that, nothing. It was as if he had vanished from public life. Lily printed the company picnic photo, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her pocket. Then she deleted her search history and left the library, heading toward the hospital. She knew she was taking a risk returning so soon, but the pendant connection had awakened something inside her, a hunger for answers she couldn't ignore. This time she approached differently. Instead of sneaking in, she walked through the main entrance in the late afternoon, when visitors were plentiful. She'd washed her face in a public bathroom and combed her hair with her fingers. With her cleanest jeans and a hoodie that wasn't too worn, she could pass for a normal kid visiting a relative. In the gift shop, she lingered by a display of flowers, watching the cashier help other customers. When the woman turned away to reach for gift wrap, Lily quickly took a small bouquet of daisies from a bucket. Not stealing, she told herself, just borrowing for appearance's sake. She'd return them later. Flowers in hand, she looked like any other visitor. She took the elevator to the 4th floor, keeping her head down as she passed the nurse's station. Room 412 was her destination, but as she approached, she heard voices inside. Pausing just out of sight, she listened. "The latest scans look promising," a male voice was saying, a doctor from his authoritative tone. "The swelling has decreased significantly. We expect him to regain consciousness within the next 24 to 48 hours. And his cognitive function?" That was a woman's voice, crisp, concerned. "We won't know for certain until he wakes, but the indicators are positive." Lily peered around the doorframe. Inside, she could see the doctor speaking with the blonde woman from the first night, Sarah. Beside her stood the young man with curly hair and glasses, Michael. The third sibling, James, was not present. She retreated, finding a small waiting area down the hall where she could sit unnoticed. The flowers provided perfect cover. She appeared to be simply waiting her turn to visit someone. From this position, she could monitor room 412 and wait for the Caldwells to leave. What she didn't realize was that she was being watched. Across the hall, a man in plain clothes sat reading a newspaper, occasionally glancing in her direction. Carson Reed had been hired to find her, and now he had. After 20 minutes, Sarah and Michael emerged from their father's room, speaking in low voices as they walked toward the elevator. Lily waited until they were gone, then stood gathering her borrowed flowers. This was her chance, but as she approached room 412, a tall figure stepped into her path. James Caldwell looked down at her with intense eyes that missed nothing. "Hello," he said quietly. "I think you and I need to talk." Lily froze, her flight instinct screaming. She looked for escape routes, but the man from the waiting area had appeared behind her, blocking the hallway. She was caught. "I'm not going to hurt you," James continued, his voice softer now. "I just want to understand why you've been visiting my father." Lily clutched the flowers tightly, her knuckles white. I was there when the accident happened. I know. You helped him. You saved his life." James knelt down so they were at eye level. "And we're very grateful. But that doesn't explain why you keep coming back." She remained silent, unwilling to mention the pendant. That was her secret, her only clue to her own past. James studied her face. "What's your name?" After a moment's hesitation, "Lily. Lily. I'm James Caldwell." He gestured toward his father's room. "Would you like to come in? Properly this time?" Uncertain, but seeing no alternative, Lily nodded. James led the way, holding the door for her. Robert Caldwell lay as before, still and connected to machines, but with fewer tubes now. The room was filled with flower arrangements far more elaborate than Lily's small bouquet, which she now placed awkwardly on a side table. "The doctors say he might wake up soon," James said, standing beside the bed. "Then perhaps he can tell us if he knows why you're here." Lily moved closer to the bed, studying Robert's face. "I don't think he knows me," she said finally. "Then why—" "I don't know," she interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "I just feel like I need to be here." James's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowning at the message. "I need to step out for a moment. Carson will stay with you." The investigator nodded, taking up position by the door as James left. Lily stood awkwardly beside Robert's bed, feeling the weight of Carson's watchful gaze. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady beep of monitors. "He has a nice face," Lily said eventually, looking at Robert. "He looks kind." Carson raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Do you work for them?" Lily asked. "For the family, yes." "Are they good people?" The question seemed to surprise him. After a thoughtful pause, he answered, "They're complicated, like most families." The door opened and James returned, his expression unreadable. He was holding a tablet, which he set down on a table without looking at Lily. "Carson, would you excuse us for a moment?" The investigator nodded and stepped outside. James took a deep breath, then turned to face Lily. "I just received some preliminary information about you," he said carefully. "You've been living on the streets, no school records, no official guardian." Lily tensed, ready to run. "You're not in trouble," James added quickly. "But I need to know more. Where is your family, Lily?" "Don't have one," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Everyone has a family," he countered gently. "Parents, grandparents. My mum's gone, never knew my dad." "What was your mother's name?" Lily hesitated, then said, "Eleanor. Elena Reynolds." Something flickered across James's face. Recognition? Shock? But it was gone so quickly Lily couldn't be sure. "And she never told you about your father?" "Just that he wasn't ready to be a dad, that he came from money, but his family wouldn't approve of her." Lily touched her pendant through her shirt, a habitual gesture of comfort. "She gave me this. Said it was his." "What did she give you?" James asked, his voice strangely intent. Slowly, Lily pulled out the silver pendant, letting it rest on her palm for James to see. The tree in the circle gleamed dully under the fluorescent lights. James stared at it, the color draining from his face. His hand moved to his pocket where he seemed to be clutching something. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse. "Lily, I think we need to have a longer conversation, and I think my brother and sister should be part of it." Before she could respond, the monitors beside Robert's bed changed their rhythm. His eyelids fluttered, his fingers twitched. Both Lily and James turned toward him, their conversation forgotten, as Robert Caldwell began, at last, to wake. The room erupted into controlled chaos as nurses and doctors rushed in, responding to the changes in Robert's vital signs. James quickly guided Lily out into the hallway, where Carson waited with a questioning look. "Stay with her," James instructed the investigator. "Don't let her leave. I need to call Sarah and Michael." Lily stood awkwardly beside Carson, watching James pace at the end of the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. She considered running. She was fast and knew the hospital's layout well enough now to find an exit, but curiosity held her in place. That and the pendant. James had recognized it, she was certain. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked Carson, nodding toward Robert's room. "Mr. Caldwell is a fighter," Carson replied, his professional demeanor softening slightly. "Always has been." Within 30 minutes, Sarah and Michael arrived, breathless from rushing. James met them by the elevators, speaking in hushed tones and gesturing occasionally toward Lily. She watched their faces change. Surprise, disbelief, confusion. Sarah kept shaking her head while Michael's eyes widened behind his glasses. Finally, all three siblings approached her. "Lily," James said formally, "these are my siblings, Sarah and Michael." Sarah studied her with narrowed eyes. "James says you've been visiting our father, and that you have something that belongs to our family," Michael added more gently. Lily's hand went protectively to her pendant. "It's mine." My mom gave it to me. May I see it again? James asked. Reluctantly, Lily pulled the pendant out, letting it hang from its leather cord. Sarah gasped. Michael whispered, "Oh my God." "Where did you get this?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp. "I told you. My mom gave it to me. She said it was my dad's." "And your mother's name was Elena Reynolds?" James confirmed. Lily nodded. Sarah turned to her brothers. "This is ridiculous. We need DNA testing before jumping to conclusions." "Look at her face, Sarah," Michael said quietly. "Look at her eyes." "Coincidence," Sarah dismissed, but her voice lacked conviction. A doctor emerged from Robert's room, interrupting their tense exchange. "He's awake," she announced. "Responsive and oriented. He's asking for his children." "All of us?" James asked with a meaningful glance at Lily. "He specifically mentioned his 3 children," the doctor clarified. "But he seems a bit confused, which is normal after what he's been through. We'll be right in," James assured her. When the doctor left, he turned to Carson. "Take Lily to the cafeteria. Get her something to eat. We'll talk to our father first, then decide next steps." "I want to see him," Lily protested. "Later," James promised. "After we've explained the situation." Reluctantly, Lily allowed Carson to lead her toward the elevators. As they walked away, she heard Sarah hiss, "This is insane. She can't possibly be—" The elevator doors closed, cutting off the rest of the sentence. In the cafeteria, Carson bought Lily a sandwich, fruit cup, and chocolate milk. She ate hungrily, realizing she hadn't had a proper meal all day. The investigator watched her with professional interest. "How long have you been on your own?" he asked. Lily shrugged. "Couple years. And before that?" "Lived with my mom in an apartment in Southeast until she disappeared." "Disappeared? Went to work one day and never came home." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes focused on her sandwich. "Landlord kicked me out after 2 months when the rent wasn't paid." "No other family members came for you?" She shook her head. "Mom always said it was just us." Carson made a note in his phone. "Do you know where your mother worked?" "Some fancy house up in the West Hills. She cleaned for rich people." His eyebrows rose slightly at this, but he said nothing more. Upstairs, the Caldwell siblings entered their father's room with apprehension. Robert was sitting up slightly, his bed raised to a comfortable angle. The head bandage had been reduced to a smaller dressing, and some of the monitoring equipment had been removed. Though pale and clearly weakened, his eyes were alert and focused. "My children," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "All safe." "We're here, Dad," Sarah said, taking his hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I drove into a pole," he replied with a weak smile. "They tell me that's exactly what happened." "Do you remember anything about the accident?" James asked. Robert frowned. "Not much. I was driving back from a meeting, felt dizzy suddenly. Then nothing until waking up here." His gaze moved between his children. "How long?" 4 days, Michael supplied. "You had us worried." "I'm sorry for that." Robert squeezed Sarah's hand, then looked at James. "The doctors mentioned someone helped me at the scene, before the ambulance arrived." James exchanged glances with his siblings. "Yes, a young girl broke your car window. Helped pull you out. I'd like to thank her," Robert said. "Do we know who she is?" A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, James spoke. "Dad, there's something we need to discuss. About the girl." Carefully, James explained about Lily's repeated visits to the hospital, her connection to the accident, and finally the pendant. As he spoke, Robert's expression changed from curiosity to shock to something deeper, a pain that seemed to have nothing to do with his physical injuries. "She's here?" "Now?" Robert asked when James finished. "Downstairs in the cafeteria," Michael confirmed. "What's her name?" "Lily. Lily Reynolds." Robert closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. "Elena's daughter," he whispered. "You knew her mother?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. "Elena worked for us," Robert said, opening his eyes. "For the family. Years ago. She was the housekeeper Thomas got involved with," James stated flatly. "The one who disappeared." Robert nodded wearily. "Thomas gave her that pendant. It belonged to our grandmother. He had 2 made, identical, when he realized Elena was pregnant. So she's—" Michael began. "Your cousin," Robert confirmed. "Thomas's daughter." Sarah stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "This is crazy. We can't just take her word for it. She could be anyone." "The pendant," Michael started. "Could be a replica," Sarah interrupted. "Or stolen. We need proof." "Look at her, Sarah," Robert said quietly. She has his eyes, his mother's eyes, our grandmother's eyes. Thomas has been gone for 3 years, James said. If she's his daughter, why didn't he take her with him? Robert's expression darkened. Your brother didn't leave voluntarily, he was pushed out. By who? Michael asked. By me. The admission hung heavy in the room. There were irregularities in the company finances. Evidence pointed to Thomas. He denied it, but the board wanted action. As CEO, I had to protect the company. You fired your own brother? Sarah's voice was incredulous. I gave him a choice. Resign quietly with a severance package or face a public investigation. Robert's voice broke. He chose to leave. Cut all ties. I haven't heard from him since. And you never tried to find him? Michael asked. Your own brother? The evidence was compelling, Michael. I believed he was guilty. And now? James pressed. Robert's eyes filled with tears. Now I don't know. Looking back, it was too neat, too convenient. Someone wanted Thomas gone. Dad, are you saying he was framed? James leaned forward. I'm saying I made a terrible mistake. Robert attempted to sit up straighter, wincing with the effort. I need to see her. Bring Lily to me. In the cafeteria, Lily had finished her meal and was growing restless. Carson maintained his watchful presence, professionally courteous but clearly not about to let her slip away. Her tension eased somewhat when she saw Michael Caldwell exit the elevator and approach their table. Carson, James wants you upstairs, Michael said. I'll stay with Lily. After the investigator left, Michael sat across from Lily, studying her with undisguised curiosity. Unlike his siblings, his expression held no suspicion, only wonder. Sorry about all this, he said finally. It must be confusing for you. Lily shrugged. I'm used to weird situations. Michael smiled slightly. I bet you are. He fiddled with a sugar packet from the table. Lily, my father would like to meet you. Properly, I mean. Are you okay with that? Is he going to call social services? The directness of the question seemed to surprise Michael. No, not right now anyway. He just wants to talk to you. Lily considered this. That pendant I showed you, your brother recognized it. Yes. Why? Michael hesitated. It's a family heirloom. Sort of. My mom said it belonged to my dad. I think, Michael said carefully, that's exactly what we need to talk about. Upstairs, Robert had asked for a few moments alone to compose himself. Sarah had left to make phone calls, her practical nature asserting itself through action. James waited in the hallway, deep in thought, when Carson approached. Mr. Caldwell, I have that information you requested about Elena Reynolds. James accepted the tablet Carson offered, scanning the document displayed there. Are you certain about this? Yes, sir. Police report from 3 years ago. Elena Reynolds disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Her apartment showed no signs of packing or planned departure. Her last known location was the Caldwell family home, where she worked as a housekeeper. Case remains open, but inactive. James's jaw tightened. And no one informed the family? According to the report, the responding officer spoke with Mrs. Margaret Caldwell, your aunt. She stated Ms. Reynolds had been terminated for theft and was no longer associated with the family. Aunt Margaret, James muttered. She always did handle the household staff. There's more, Carson continued. Eleanor Reynolds had a daughter, approximately 9 years old at the time of her disappearance. The child was briefly placed in foster care but ran away. Authorities lost track of her. Lily, James said softly. The timeline matches, Carson confirmed. And there's a physical resemblance to your uncle in the childhood photos we found. The elevator doors opened, revealing Michael and Lily. The girl looked small beside him, wary but determined. Her hand clutched the pendant through her shirt, a gesture James now recognized from old family videos of his grandmother, who had the same habit with her own necklace. Carson, give us some privacy, James instructed. The investigator nodded and moved to a discreet distance. I've explained that Dad wants to meet her, Michael said. Is he ready? Yes. James knelt to Lily's eye level. Lily, my father is very grateful for what you did, but there's something else you should know before you meet him. What? She asked, her voice small but steady. We believe... James paused, choosing his words carefully. We believe you might be related to our family, that your father may have been our brother Thomas. Lily's eyes widened. My dad? It's just a possibility right now, Michael added gently. But there are connections that make us think it might be true. Like the necklace, Lily said. Yes, like the necklace. James stood. Are you ready to meet him? Lily nodded, her expression a mixture of fear and hope that tightened something in James's chest. He led the way to room 412, holding the door open for her. Robert Caldwell was sitting up, his appearance as composed as possible under the circumstances. When Lily entered, his face underwent a remarkable transformation. Recognition, grief, and joy all mingled together. "Hello, Lily," he said softly. She approached the bed cautiously. "Hello. I understand I have you to thank for saving my life." "I just broke the window," she said with a shrug. "Anyone would have done it. But they didn't. You did." Robert studied her face with intensity. "You have your grandmother's eyes." Lily blinked in surprise. "You knew my grandmother?" "I knew your father," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "My brother." The room fell silent except for the soft beeping of monitors. Lily stood very still, absorbing this information, her quick mind connecting dots. "Is he alive?" she finally asked. "I don't know," Robert admitted. "We haven't spoken in 3 years." "Why?" Robert exchanged glances with his sons. "It's complicated, Lily, but I promise I'll explain everything." Lily's hand went to her pendant again, drawing it out fully. "He gave this to my mum." "Yes," Robert confirmed. "It belonged to our grandmother. Thomas had replicas made when he knew your mother was expecting you. One for Elena, one for himself." "My mum said he didn't want me." "That's not true," Robert said firmly. "Thomas loved your mother very much, and he would have loved you too. Then why wasn't he there?" The question hung in the air, simple but devastating. Before Robert could answer, the door opened and Sarah returned. She froze at the threshold, taking in the scene, Lily standing beside her father's bed, the pendant gleaming in her hand, the unmistakable resemblance now that they were side by side. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "It's true." The emotion in her voice seemed to break something open in the room. Michael stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. James moved closer to his father's bedside, and Robert Caldwell reached out a trembling hand toward the girl who had saved his life, the girl who he now realized might also be his chance at redemption. "Lily," he said, his voice steady despite his tears, "would you like to hear about your father?" The Caldwell mansion in Portland's West Hills stood as a monument to success. 4 acres of manicured grounds, a 6-bedroom main house built in the craftsman style, but expanded over generations. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, and, on clear days, Mount Hood in the distance. It was here, in the wood-paneled library, that Lily found herself 2 days after Robert's awakening. She sat perched on the edge of an antique leather chair, feeling impossibly small amid the grandeur. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, interrupted only by a massive stone fireplace. Family photographs in silver frames adorned the mantel, formal portraits and candid moments capturing the Caldwell legacy. James sat behind the desk, sorting through files. Michael paced by the windows, occasionally glancing at his phone. Sarah was absent, having made it clear she required more concrete proof before accepting Lily into the family fold. Robert remained in the hospital, his recovery progressing well but requiring continued medical supervision. "This is where your father grew up," Michael told Lily, pausing in his pacing. "Thomas spent hours in this room. He loved to read." Lily nodded, taking in this new piece of information about the man who had unknowingly shaped her existence. Over the past 2 days, she'd learned fragments about Thomas Caldwell, that he was 4 years younger than Robert, that he had studied literature before joining the family business, that he had a talent for woodworking and built birdhouses in his spare time. "Found it," James announced, pulling a thick folder from the bottom of a stack, Thomas's personal files. "Dad asked me to look through them." He opened the folder and carefully removed a photograph, sliding it across the desk toward Lily. She picked it up, her breath catching. The image showed a younger Thomas Caldwell with his arm around a smiling woman with dark hair and warm eyes, Eleanor Reynolds, Lily's mother. They stood on a beach, waves crashing behind them, looking blissfully happy. "When was this taken?" Lily asked, her voice barely audible. "About 13 years ago, according to the date stamp," James replied. "Before you were born." Lily traced her mother's face with her fingertip. Elena looked younger, carefree, her smile unreserved in a way Lily barely remembered. The last years of her mother's life had been marked by struggle and worry, the joy in her eyes gradually dimming as circumstances grew harder. "They met here," Michael explained, sitting in a chair near Lily. "Elena worked for the family as a housekeeper. Thomas was living in the guest house at the time, taking a break from the company to write a novel. Did he finish it? Lily asked. Michael smiled sadly. No, he got pulled back into the business. Dad needed him. James continued sorting through the folder's contents. Their relationship was, complicated. The family didn't approve. Because she worked for you, Lily stated flatly. James and Michael exchanged uncomfortable glances. Partly, James admitted. There were concerns about her background. Our grandparents were very traditional, class-conscious. You mean she wasn't rich enough, Lily translated. Michael winced. Something like that. It wasn't right, but that's how things were. James removed another document from the folder, a bank statement. Thomas set up a trust fund when your mother became pregnant. Money for your education, healthcare, general support. Lily frowned. We never had any money. Mum worked 3 jobs sometimes. The trust was frozen when Thomas left the company, James explained. Part of the separation agreement. All his assets were placed in escrow pending resolution of the financial questions. You thought he stole money, Lily said bluntly. James sighed. There were discrepancies in the company accounts. Large sums missing. The evidence pointed to Thomas. But now you don't think he did it? Dad has doubts, Michael said, and honestly it never made sense to me. Thomas wasn't materialistic. He drove the same car for 15 years. The library door opened, and Sarah entered, followed by a silver-haired woman with a rigid posture and shrewd eyes. Lily recognized the family resemblance immediately. The same strong jawline, the same direct gaze that all the Caldwells possessed. Aunt Margaret, James said, rising from behind the desk. I didn't know you were coming. Clearly, the woman replied, her voice cultured and cool. Her eyes fixed on Lily. So this is the girl. This is Lily, Michael corrected, a protective note in his voice. Dad's asked us to look after her while he's in the hospital. Margaret Caldwell approached Lily, studying her with unnerving intensity. Stand up, child. Lily hesitated, then complied, meeting the older woman's gaze without flinching. The resemblance is there, Margaret admitted reluctantly. Around the eyes, the chin. Aunt Margaret was very close to Thomas, Sarah explained to Lily. She's been helping me arrange for DNA testing. Is that really necessary? Michael asked. Dad already... Robert is emotional right now, Margaret interrupted. Vulnerable after his accident. We need objective proof before making any decisions about this child's future. This child saved Dad's life, James pointed out, and we're all grateful, Margaret replied smoothly. But gratitude doesn't equate to guardianship. If she is indeed Thomas's daughter, there are legal processes to be followed. Lily sat back down, her earlier warmth evaporating under Margaret's glacial scrutiny. She understood the language of unwantedness, had lived with it her entire life. Where have you been living, Lily? Margaret asked. Around, Lily answered vaguely. She's been homeless, Sarah supplied, her tone softening slightly. Since her mother disappeared. Margaret's eyebrows rose. Disappeared? Or abandoned you? She wouldn't leave me, Lily said firmly. Something happened to her. When exactly did Elena vanish? James asked, his expression thoughtful. 3 years ago, April 12th. James and Michael exchanged significant looks. What? Sarah asked, catching their silent communication. That's 2 days before Thomas was accused of embezzlement, James said quietly. 2 days before everything fell apart. A heavy silence descended on the room. Lily looked between the adults, sensing undercurrents she couldn't fully understand but feeling their importance. Coincidence, Margaret said dismissively. Eleanor Reynolds had a history of instability. It's more likely she simply left. She wouldn't, Lily insisted, her voice rising. She loved me. Of course she did, dear. Margaret's tone was patronizing. But adults make difficult choices sometimes. Aunt Margaret, Michael intervened, perhaps we could continue this conversation later. Lily's had a lot to process. The older woman nodded stiffly. I'll be staying in the East Wing for the duration of Robert's recovery. We'll speak again. She swept from the room, Sarah following after an apologetic glance at her brothers. When they were gone, Lily released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She doesn't like me. Aunt Margaret doesn't like change, Michael said kindly, and you represent a very big change. James had returned to the folder, examining documents with increasing concentration. This is interesting, he murmured. What? Michael moved to look over his shoulder. Thomas kept records of his conversations with the board during the embezzlement investigation. James held up a handwritten journal. and he specifically mentions confronting Aunt Margaret about discrepancies in the household accounts 2 weeks before he was accused. What kind of discrepancies? Michael asked. Large payments to a company called Sentinel Security Services. James flipped through the pages. Thomas couldn't find any evidence they provided actual services to the family. I've never heard of them, Michael said. Neither had Thomas, apparently. James continued reading. He planned to bring it up at the next board meeting, but that never happened because he was accused first, Michael finished. Lily listened intently, piecing together the fragments of a story she was only beginning to understand. You think your aunt had something to do with what happened to my father? James closed the journal carefully. I think there are questions that need answers. A soft knock interrupted them. Carson stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Caldwell asked me to bring these files from his home office, he said, placing a USB drive on the desk, and to inform you that he's being discharged tomorrow morning. Thank you, Carson, James said. Did he say anything else? Only that Ms. Lily's room should be prepared in the main house, not the guest house. Carson's gaze flickered briefly to Lily, and that the blue bedroom would be appropriate. After Carson left, Lily asked, What's the blue bedroom? Michael smiled. It was Thomas's room when he was growing up, Dad's being sentimental. James inserted the USB drive into his laptop. Let's see what Dad sent us. The files contained financial records, spreadsheets, bank statements, audit reports. James scrolled through them methodically, while Michael explained to Lily about the family business, Caldwell Technologies, which developed security software for corporate and government clients. Your father was brilliant with systems, Michael told her. He could see patterns nobody else could. That's what made him so valuable to the company. And potentially dangerous to someone with something to hide, James added, still focused on the screen. Do you really think Aunt Margaret stole from the company? Michael asked quietly. I don't know, but these records show regular payments to Sentinel continuing after Thomas left. They stopped completely 6 months ago. When Dad had his first health scare, Michael realized, when he started talking about retirement and putting his affairs in order. James nodded grimly. Someone didn't want Thomas or Dad looking too closely at those payments. Lily's mind made connections lightning quick. Could they have something to do with my mom disappearing? The brothers looked at her with new respect. It's possible, James acknowledged. Elena worked in this house. She might have seen or heard something she wasn't supposed to. We need to be careful, Michael cautioned. If we're right about this, we're dealing with someone who's already gone to extreme lengths to protect themselves. Dad will know what to do, James decided. We'll talk to him tomorrow when he's home. Later that evening, Michael showed Lily to the guest room where she'd be staying until Robert returned. It was larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in, with a 4-poster bed, a window seat overlooking the gardens, and an attached bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. There are clothes in the dresser, Michael told her. Sarah picked them up this afternoon. They should fit. Lily ran her hand over the soft comforter. Why are you all being so nice to me? You don't even know for sure if I'm related to you. Michael smiled gently. You saved our father's life. That would be enough reason. But honestly, Lily, one look at you and I knew. You have the Caldwell spark. What's that? Something my dad always talked about. A way of seeing the world, of thinking about problems. You showed it when you broke that car window. When nobody else would act, you did. After Michael left, Lily explored the room, opening drawers to find neatly folded jeans, t-shirts, sweaters, all new, all in her size. In the bathroom, she discovered toiletries, a fluffy robe, slippers. Such ordinary things, yet they represented a life she'd never known, one where needs were anticipated and met without question. She took a long shower, letting hot water sluice away years of grime that quick rinses in public restrooms had never fully addressed. Afterward, wrapped in the too big robe, she stood at the window, looking out at the illuminated gardens and, beyond them, the twinkling lights of Portland. Somewhere out there was her father. Somewhere was the truth about her mother's disappearance. And somewhere, perhaps in this very house, was the person responsible for tearing her family apart. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Sarah, looking uncomfortable but determined. I brought you something to sleep in, she said, holding out a folded nightgown. The clothes we got today didn't include pajamas. Thank you, Lily said, accepting the garment. Sarah lingered in the doorway. I want you to know I'm not against you, I'm just cautious by nature. It's my job to protect this family. I understand. Do you? Sarah studied her. Everything changed for us today too, Lily. If you are who we think you are, it means our brother had a child we never knew about. It means someone in our family may have wronged him terribly. It means our entire understanding of the past is built on lies. Lily considered this. My whole life might be different than I thought too. We're both trying to find the truth. Sarah's expression softened. You're very mature for your age. Had to be. An awkward silence stretched between them. Finally, Sarah said, "Well, good night. If you need anything, my room is down the hall." The blue door. After she left, Lily changed into the nightgown, silk with delicate embroidery at the collar. She climbed into the enormous bed, sinking into softness that felt almost unreal after years of concrete floors and thin blankets. Despite the luxury surrounding her, sleep eluded her. Too much had happened, too many revelations and questions swirling in her mind. She thought of her mother, wondered if Elena had ever been in this house, perhaps even cleaned this very room. She thought of Thomas Caldwell, the father she'd never known, writing his unfinished novel in the guest house. And she thought about the shadowy figure who might have orchestrated it all, who might have stolen her chance at a normal life, who might have taken her mother away, who might even now be watching her from somewhere within these walls. Just before dawn, Lily made a decision. She wouldn't wait for the adults to solve the mystery. She would find the truth herself, about her father, her mother, and the secrets the Caldwell family had kept buried for too long. The morning brought a flurry of activity to the Caldwell mansion. Staff members Lily hadn't yet met moved efficiently through the halls, preparing for Robert's homecoming. A nurse set up medical equipment in the master suite. The housekeeper directed the placement of fresh flowers. The chef consulted with Sarah about appropriate meals for Robert's recovery diet. Amid the commotion, Lily moved like a ghost, observing everything but participating in nothing. She wore new jeans and a sweater from the clothes Sarah had purchased, feeling like an imposter in her clean, proper appearance. No one questioned her presence. James had apparently issued instructions that she was to be treated as family, but she felt the curious glances of the staff, the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. In the kitchen, she found Michael making coffee. Unlike his siblings, who carried themselves with the unconscious authority of the privileged, Michael had a gentler presence. He smiled when he saw her. "Sleep okay?" he asked, pouring a second cup and offering it to her. Lily nodded, accepting the coffee, though she rarely drank it. "When is Robert coming home?" "James left to pick him up about 20 minutes ago. They should be here around 11. Michael leaned against the counter. "Nervous about seeing him again?" "A little," she admitted. "Everything's happening so fast." "I know, it's a lot." He sipped his coffee. "Dad called this morning. He wants to talk to all of us together when he gets here, including you." "About what?" "Thomas, I think, and about what happens next." Michael studied her over the rim of his cup. "What do you want to happen, Lily?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked what she wanted in a very long time. "I want to find my dad," she said finally, "and I want to know what happened to my mom." Michael nodded. "Dad wants those things too, and he wants you to stay here, with us." "What about Aunt Margaret? What about her?" Sarah asked, entering the kitchen. She wore a tailored blouse and slacks, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, ready for business. "Lily's wondering about Aunt Margaret's perspective," Michael explained diplomatically. Sarah poured herself coffee. "Aunt Margaret will adjust. The DNA results should be back in a few days, but honestly, it's just a formality at this point." She gave Lily a small smile. "Dad's convinced, and that's what matters." The sound of car tires on gravel drew their attention. Through the kitchen window, they could see James's Range Rover pulling up to the front entrance. "They're early," Sarah said, glancing at her watch. "Come on." In the grand foyer, with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier, they waited as James helped Robert from the car. Though still pale and moving carefully, Robert looked stronger than he had in the hospital. He wore a casual sweater and slacks rather than his usual business attire, the only concession to his convalescent status. When he entered the house, his eyes immediately sought Lily. His face brightened. "There you are. I was hoping you hadn't run off." "Not yet," she replied with unexpected honesty that made him laugh. "Good. We have a lot to talk about." He gestured toward the library. "Shall we?" The family assembled in the familiar wood-paneled room, Robert in a comfortable armchair by the fireplace, his children arranged around him. Lily perched once again on the edge of her seat. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden light. "Where's Aunt Margaret?" Sarah asked, noticing her absence. She went into the city for a meeting, Robert replied. She'll be back this afternoon. He turned to Lily. I understand you've been getting to know my children. Lily nodded. They've been nice. I'm glad. Robert shifted slightly, wincing at some hidden pain. Lily, I owe you more than just my life. I owe you an explanation about your father and about what happened to your family. The room fell silent. Even the usual creaks and settlings of the old house seemed to pause. Thomas was always different from the rest of us, Robert began. More idealistic, less interested in wealth and status. When he fell in love with your mother, he didn't care what anyone thought. Not our parents, not the board members, not even me. A sad smile crossed his face. I admired that about him, even while I worried about the consequences. Did you like my mum? Lily asked. Very much. Elena was warm, intelligent, hard-working. She made Thomas happy in a way I'd never seen before. Robert's expression darkened. But my parents, they were from a different era. They couldn't accept the relationship. When Elena became pregnant, they threatened to disinherit Thomas unless he ended things. But he didn't, Lily said. No, he chose Elena and you. He moved out of the family home into an apartment downtown. He kept working for the company but distanced himself from the family socially. Robert sighed. After our parents died, I tried to mend the rift, invited Thomas back into the fold. But by then, patterns were established. Elena worked here as a housekeeper to help with expenses, but she and Thomas maintained separate residences for appearances' sake. So you knew about me? Lily asked, her voice small. Robert nodded. Thomas was so proud. He showed me your baby pictures, told me about your first steps, your first words. He wanted to acknowledge you publicly, but Elena was concerned about how it might affect you, to be suddenly thrust into the spotlight as a Caldwell heir. Then what happened? Michael prompted, when his father fell silent. Robert's face became grave. 3 years ago, financial irregularities were discovered in the company accounts, large sums missing, transactions that couldn't be explained. The evidence pointed to Thomas. As CEO, I had to take action. You believed he did it? Sarah asked, surprise evident in her voice. I didn't want to, but the forensic accountants were convinced. The board was unanimous. Even Aunt Margaret, who had always been Thomas's strongest advocate, agreed he should be removed. Robert closed his eyes briefly. I confronted him. He denied everything, said he was being set up, but he couldn't explain the evidence. So you forced him out, James said. I gave him a choice. Resign with a settlement or face criminal charges. Robert's voice cracked. He took the settlement, cut all ties with the family, with the company, disappeared. What about my mum? Lily asked, leaning forward. What happened to her? Elena stopped coming to work around the same time. I assumed she'd gone with Thomas. Robert looked genuinely confused. You're saying she didn't? She disappeared. Just didn't come home one day. Lily's hands tightened into fists. I waited for her for days, then the landlord kicked me out. Horror dawned on Robert's face. My God, you've been alone all this time? While you thought what? James asked sharply. Margaret told me she'd spoken with Elena, that arrangements had been made for child support, that Thomas was taking care of you both from a distance. Robert turned to Lily, anguish in his eyes. I never checked. I was angry with Thomas, hurt by his betrayal. I let myself believe what was convenient. The implications settled over the room like a shroud. Lily felt a cold certainty forming in her mind. Your aunt lied, she said simply. So it seems. Robert's expression hardened. The question is why? James stood, pacing toward the desk. Dad, I've been looking through Thomas's records and the company financials you sent. The payments to Sentinel Security Services. Yes, I noticed those too. Robert nodded. They began about a year before Thomas left. Substantial monthly payments authorized by Margaret, who managed the family household accounts. But what were they for? Sarah asked. We've never used an outside security firm. We have Carson and the regular staff. Exactly. Robert's voice was grim. I called Carson this morning, asked him to look into Sentinel. It's a shell company, Sarah. The payments went to an offshore account. Michael leaned forward. Are you saying Aunt Margaret was embezzling from the company and framed Thomas when he got too close to discovering it? James added, the pieces falling into place. It appears so. Robert turned to Lily. And if Elena knew something or suspected something, the unspoken conclusion hung in the air. Lily felt a strange numbness spreading through her body. She had lived for years with the mystery of her mother's disappearance. creating scenarios in her mind that Eleanor had been in an accident, had lost her memory, had been forced to go away for some reason, but would return when she could. Never had she allowed herself to consider the possibility that someone had deliberately— "We need proof," Sarah said, her practical nature asserting itself. "Suspicions aren't enough. I've asked Carson to gather everything he can find on Sentinel and the offshore accounts," Robert replied. "And I've called a board meeting for tomorrow to address the situation." "Does Aunt Margaret know what you're doing?" Michael asked. "No. I told her I wanted to review the company's financial position after my absence." Robert's expression was troubled. "Until we have concrete evidence, we need to proceed carefully." "What about Lily?" James asked. "If Margaret suspects we're investigating, Lily stays here with us," Robert said firmly, "where we can protect her." Lily, who had remained silent during these revelations, finally spoke. "What about my dad? If he didn't do anything wrong, where is he?" A pained look crossed Robert's face. "I don't know, Lily. We lost all contact after he left. The settlement included a non-disclosure agreement. He couldn't discuss the company or the accusations. He couldn't reach out to former colleagues or clients. But he could have reached out to you," Sarah pointed out. "You're his brother." "I didn't exactly leave that door open," Robert admitted. "I was harsh when we last spoke. Said things I've regretted every day since. If Thomas is innocent and if Margaret is behind all this," James said slowly, "then finding him becomes even more urgent. He could be in danger too." A soft knock interrupted them. The housekeeper entered, looking apologetic. "Excuse me, Mr. Caldwell, but Miss Margaret has returned. She's asking to speak with you in private." Robert exchanged glances with his children. "Tell her I'll meet her in my study in 10 minutes. After the housekeeper left, Robert turned to James. "Take Lily into the city. Visit the office. Show her around. Stay there until I call you." "Dad, are you sure that's wise?" Sarah asked. "If you confront Aunt Margaret—" "I won't confront her directly." "Not yet." Robert's voice was steely. "But I need to know Lily is safely away from here while I begin asking questions." Lily stood. "I want to stay. If this is about my mom, I have a right to know." "You do," Robert agreed, "and I promise you will know everything. But right now your safety is my priority." He reached for her hand. "Please, Lily, let me do this right. Let me protect you the way I should have protected your father." Something in his voice, in the genuine remorse in his eyes, convinced her. She nodded reluctantly. "Good girl." Robert squeezed her hand. "James will keep you safe. Michael and Sarah will stay here with me. By tonight we'll hopefully have answers." As Lily and James prepared to leave, Robert called his eldest son back for a final word. Lily waited in the hallway but could still hear their hushed conversation. "Take her to the downtown office, not the campus," Robert instructed. "Use the executive elevator, and James, the safe in my office. The combination is your grandmother's birthday. Inside there's a file labeled contingency. Take it with you." "What is it?" James asked. "Insurance," Robert replied grimly. "Thomas gave it to me years ago. Said if anything ever happened to him I should open it. I never did. Until now. Until now." In the car, driving toward downtown Portland, Lily watched the Caldwell mansion recede in the side mirror. The grand house, which had seemed so imposing yesterday, now felt like the center of a web of lies that had ensnared her family for years. "What's in the file?" she asked James, as they merged onto the freeway. He glanced at her, surprised. "You heard that?" "I hear most things," she replied simply. "People don't notice me, so they talk freely." James smiled slightly. "A useful skill." He focused back on the road. "I don't know what's in the file, but if Thomas left it as insurance, it must contain something important. Something that could prove he didn't steal the money. Possibly. Or something more." James's expression was thoughtful. Dad didn't want to believe Thomas was guilty, not really. But the evidence was compelling. Emails, financial records, transfers that seemed to trace directly back to Thomas's accounts. "Faked," Lily said with certainty. "Most likely, but professionally done." James navigated through traffic with practiced ease, which means whoever framed him had resources, expertise. "Your aunt?" "Aunt Margaret has always been the practical one in the family. The one who keeps things running smoothly behind the scenes." James frowned. "But to orchestrate something like this, to potentially harm your mother, that's a different level of deception." "People do terrible things for money," Lily said, the wisdom in her young voice making James glance at her sharply. "Yes, they do." He sighed. "Let's hope that file gives us some answers." The Caldwell Technologies headquarters, occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Portland. James led Lily through a private entrance and into an executive elevator that required his fingerprint to operate. As they ascended to the penthouse level, Lily watched the floor numbers climb, feeling further removed from the world she had known just days before. "Your father worked here?" she asked, as the elevator doors opened onto a reception area decorated in muted greys and blues. The Caldwell Technologies logo, a stylized tree within a circle much like her pendant, displayed prominently on the wall. "Thomas's office was down the hall from Dad's," James confirmed, leading her through secure doors into the executive suite. He was chief operating officer, brilliant with systems and processes. Robert's office was a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering panoramic views of the city and the Willamette River beyond. A massive desk of polished walnut dominated one end, while comfortable seating areas occupied the other. Art, mostly modern abstracts in bold colors, adorned the walls. James went directly to a painting behind the desk, a landscape of Mount Hood at sunset. He swung it aside to reveal a wall safe, quickly entering the combination. The safe door opened with a soft click. Inside were stacks of documents, several USB drives, and a thick manila envelope labeled simply "Contingency" in neat handwriting. James removed it, weighing it in his hand. "Whatever's in here, Thomas thought it was important enough to keep in the most secure place he could access," he said. "Are you ready to find out what it is?" Lily nodded, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. After 3 years of unknowing, of surviving on the margins, the truth about her family lay within that envelope. Whatever it contained would change her life forever. Again. James carefully broke the seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a smaller sealed envelope and a handwritten letter addressed to Robert. James unfolded the letter, holding it so Lily could read along with him. "Robert," it began, "if you're reading this, something has gone very wrong. I've discovered irregularities in the family accounts that I believe indicate long-term embezzlement. The attached evidence shows transfers to a shell company called Sentinel Security Services, which I've traced to an offshore account controlled by Margaret." As they continued reading, the full extent of Thomas's discoveries became clear, and with it, the danger that had threatened Lily's family for years. The truth was finally emerging from shadow, but whether it would bring healing or further pain remained to be seen. The Portland skyline glittered beneath a canopy of stars as Lily stood on the balcony of Robert's downtown penthouse. 2 weeks had passed since the day she broke the window of a crashed Tesla, 2 weeks that had transformed her life in ways she still struggled to comprehend. Behind her, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the Caldwell family gathered in the living room. Robert sat in a comfortable armchair, still recovering but growing stronger each day. Sarah and Michael were engaged in what appeared to be a friendly argument about a movie. James was on the phone, his expression serious as always, but softer than it had been when Lily first met him. Family. Her family. The DNA results had confirmed what they already knew. Lily was Thomas Caldwell's daughter, Robert's niece, cousin to James, Sarah, and Michael. The legal proceedings to establish her identity and guardianship were underway, with Robert petitioning for custody. For the first time in years, Lily had a name, a home, a place in the world beyond the margins. But these gains had come with painful revelations. The evidence in Thomas's contingency file had been damning, detailed records of Margaret Caldwell's systematic embezzlement from both the company and family accounts over a 15-year period. Millions diverted to offshore accounts, carefully falsified records, and, most disturbing of all, emails discussing the need to handle the Elena situation when Thomas's former girlfriend began asking questions about household expenses she was tracking as part of her duties. The confrontation with Margaret had been brief, but devastating. Faced with the evidence James and Lily had discovered, she had initially denied everything, then attempted to justify her actions as protecting the family interests. When that failed, she had tried to flee the country, only to be intercepted at the airport by federal agents alerted by Carson. Now she sat in a federal detention center, facing charges of embezzlement, fraud, and, most seriously, conspiracy related to Elena's disappearance. She had not confessed to direct involvement in what happened to Lily's mother, but the circumstantial evidence was strong enough for the authorities to reopen the investigation with new urgency. Lily's memories of that day, when James had called Robert from the downtown office, when the police had been summoned, when Margaret had looked at her with cold hatred as she was led away, were fragmented, dreamlike. She remembered Robert holding her as she cried, remembered Sarah's protective arm around her shoulders, remembered Michael's quiet reassurances that they would get through this together. But one memory stood out with crystal clarity: the moment James had found the second item in Thomas's envelope. A single key attached to a tag with an address in Astoria, a coastal town about 2 hours from Portland. "Someone's looking for you," Michael said, stepping onto the balcony. He handed Lily a mug of hot chocolate. "Dad says it's almost time." Lily nodded, sipping the rich, sweet drink. "Is everything ready?" "As ready as it can be." "Are you nervous?" "Yes." She looked up at him. "What if he doesn't want to see me?" Michael's expression softened. "Lily, he's been looking for you for 3 years. Trust me, he wants to see you." The search for Thomas Caldwell had begun immediately after Margaret's arrest. With the non-disclosure agreement nullified by the discovery of fraud, Robert had used every resource at his disposal: private investigators, media appeals, corporate connections, to find his brother. The key had led them to a small apartment above a bookstore in Astoria, where Thomas had apparently been living under the name Thomas Reynolds. The apartment had been empty, but neighbors confirmed a man matching his description had lived there until 6 months ago, when he'd moved on without leaving a forwarding address. What they did find was a wall covered with newspaper clippings, printouts of social media posts, and maps marked with locations throughout Portland, all focused on sightings of a homeless girl who matched Lily's description. Thomas had been searching for his daughter all along, following rumors and fragments of information, always one step behind as Lily moved through the city's shadowy margins. The breakthrough had come 3 days ago. A librarian at the Portland Central Library had seen the media coverage about the missing Caldwell heir and recognized Thomas as a regular patron who used the computers to search for information about homeless youth services. She provided a current address, a small cottage on the Oregon coast where Thomas now worked as a caretaker for a nature preserve. Robert had made contact by phone. The conversation, according to Robert, had been emotional and complex. Years of hurt and misunderstanding giving way to explanations and, ultimately, forgiveness. Thomas had been devastated to learn of Elena's disappearance and presumed fate. He had assumed she had taken Lily and gone into hiding to escape the scandal of his disgrace. By the time he discovered they were both missing, the trail had gone cold. "He's here," James announced, stepping onto the balcony. His phone glowed in his hand. "Carson just brought him up. Dad wants you in the living room." Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. She set down her mug with trembling hands and followed James inside. The family had arranged themselves with careful casualness, Robert in his chair, Sarah and Michael on the sofa, leaving space in the center of the room for the reunion they had orchestrated. The penthouse elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Carson stepped out first, followed by a man Lily recognized instantly, though she had never seen him in person before. Thomas Caldwell was leaner than in the photographs, his face weathered by sun and wind, his dark hair streaked with more gray. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, work boots, that spoke of his new life, far from corporate boardrooms. But his eyes, those were exactly as she had imagined, dark and intense, now wide with emotion as they fixed on her. "Lily," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. She stood frozen, overwhelmed by the moment she had dreamed of for so long. All the questions she had planned to ask, the things she had wanted to say, evaporated in the reality of his presence. Thomas took a hesitant step forward, then another. He stopped a few feet away, respect and uncertainty in his posture. "You look so much like your mother," he said softly. That broke the spell. Lily moved, closing the distance between them, and Thomas knelt to meet her at eye level. His hands hovered near her shoulders, not quite touching, as if she might disappear if he tried to hold her. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For so long, I never stopped." "I know," Lily said. "I found your wall with all the maps." A sad smile crossed his face. "I was always one step behind. I move around a lot," she explained. "It's safer that way." "Was safer," she corrected herself, glancing at Robert and his children, who watched with tear-filled eyes. "Lily, I'm so sorry," Thomas said, the words seeming to come from his very soul. "If I had known you were alone. If I had known what happened to Elena." "It wasn't your fault," she said with the simple certainty of a child who had seen too much of the world's complexity. "It was hers." No need to specify who her was. Thomas nodded, accepting this truth. May I? He hesitated, then opened his arms in silent question. Lily stepped into his embrace, feeling his arms close around her, strong and protective. Something locked inside her chest for years began to loosen, a knot of grief and loneliness starting to unwind. She buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, pine trees, ocean air, the faintest trace of wood smoke, somehow familiar, as if remembered from infancy. "I never got to be your dad," Thomas whispered against her hair. "I don't know if you can forgive that." Lily pulled back slightly to look at him. "You're here now." "Yes," he agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." He reached inside his shirt and pulled out a silver pendant identical to Lily's, the twin piece Robert had mentioned, the tree within a circle that connected them across time and absence. "I've worn this every day since I left," Thomas said, "to remember what matters most." Lily touched her own pendant. "Me too." Robert rose from his chair, approaching his brother with visible emotion. "Thomas." Thomas stood, keeping one arm around Lily's shoulders. The brothers looked at each other, years of hurt and misunderstanding passing between them in a silent exchange. "I was wrong," Robert said simply, "and I'm sorry." Thomas nodded. "We both made mistakes. Can you forgive me?" "I already have." Thomas extended his hand, which Robert grasped firmly before pulling him into an embrace. The rest of the family moved forward then. James with his reserved smile, Sarah with unexpected tears, Michael with open warmth. They surrounded Thomas and Lily, drawing them into the circle of family that had been broken for too long. Later, after dinner and hours of conversation, catching up on lost years, explaining what had happened, beginning to plan for the future, Lily found herself alone with Thomas on the penthouse balcony. The city lights sparkled below them, and a crescent moon hung low in the sky. "What happens now?" she asked, leaning against the railing beside him. Thomas considered the question. "That depends on what you want, Lily. Robert has offered me my old position at the company. Or we could stay on the coast. I've grown to love it there. Or something else entirely." He looked down at her. "What would make you happy?" No one had asked her that question in a very long time. Lily thought about it seriously. "I want to go to school," she said finally. "A real school. With books and friends and everything?" Thomas smiled. "Absolutely. And I want to keep making my dolls, but with better materials. I think that can be arranged. And," she hesitated, then continued, "I want to help other kids. Kids like me, who don't have anyone, who live on the streets." Thomas's expression softened with pride. "That's a wonderful idea. Could we do that? Start something that helps them?" "Yes," he said with certainty. "The Caldwell Foundation already does charitable work. We could create a special program, maybe name it after your mother." Lily liked that idea. The Elena Reynolds program for homeless youth, a way to honor her mother's memory, to create something meaningful from their shared pain. "But most importantly," Thomas continued, "I want to be your dad. Really be your dad. Make up for all the time we lost." "We can't get that time back," Lily said, wisdom beyond her years in her voice. "No," Thomas agreed, "but we can make the most of the time we have now." He knelt beside her, meeting her at eye level, as he had when they first saw each other. "Lily, I want you to know something. Every day we were apart, I thought about you, wondered what you were doing, what you were learning, who you were becoming. I kept a journal for you, writing down things I wanted to tell you if I ever found you again." "You did?" He nodded. "It's in my bag. I've brought it for you." Every entry starts the same way. "Dear Lily, today I wish I could tell you." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. Not the tears of loss she had grown accustomed to, but something new and unfamiliar. Tears of being found, of being wanted, of belonging. "Can we read it together?" she asked. "I'd like that," Thomas said, his own eyes glistening. "We have a lot of catching up to do." Inside the penthouse, the Caldwell family waited, Robert in his chair by the fireplace, James reviewing documents at the dining table, Sarah and Michael preparing dessert in the kitchen. Through the window, they could see Thomas and Lily on the balcony, silhouetted against the night sky, heads bent together in conversation. "They look right together," Michael observed, bringing coffee cups to the table. "They are right together," Robert said quietly. "Father and daughter, as it always should have been." Sarah joined them, her usual practicality softened by the events of recent weeks. "There's still a lot to figure out. Legal guardianship, Lily's education, Thomas's return to the company if that's what he wants. We'll work it all out," James said with uncharacteristic optimism. one step at a time. The important thing, Robert said, watching his brother and niece through the window, is that they're both home now. Home. The word resonated through the room, carrying weight and meaning beyond the physical space they occupied. Home was family found and restored. Home was truth revealed and accepted. Home was the end of wandering and the beginning of belonging. On the balcony, Lily leaned against her father's side, feeling the solid warmth of him. For the first time in years, she didn't need to look over her shoulder, didn't need to plan her next move or hiding place. For the first time, she could simply be a child, Thomas's daughter, Robert's niece, part of something larger than herself. She fingered her pendant, the silver tree catching moonlight, no longer just a mysterious keepsake, but a symbol of her heritage, her belonging. The Caldwell tree, with roots that ran deep and branches that reached toward the future. "Ready to go inside?" Thomas asked, noticing her shiver in the night air. Lily nodded. "Ready." Together, they turned toward the light and warmth beyond the glass, toward the family waiting to welcome them home. And as they stepped inside, Lily knew with absolute certainty that the invisible girl had finally been seen.